everyone. My name's Amy. This is my first LecoSoft webinar, so bear with me. I wanted to join ahead of what is a pre-recorded section of the webinar. So we've done that because Mark and Dan, who are part of the panel session, are based in Australia. So hopefully they are tucked up in bed at this point of the day. But I have got Andrew Norrie and Chris Ray live on the webinar so that we can do a Q&A at the end. And Andrew is part of the panel session, and Chris is doing the demo in the pre-record. And I'm here to monitor and keep an eye on questions, so questions are very welcome. So I'm going to get the pre-record started, and we hope that you enjoy. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our latest LecoSoft webinar. My name is Amy and I will be your host for today's session, where we'll dive into the future of integrated construction delivery. Across the globe, our industry is facing challenges driven by growing project size, complexity and rapidly evolving regulations. Despite major advances in building techniques and technology, productivity continues to plateau. Projects are often completed late, over budget, with contractors carrying increasing risk and under the constant pressure to improve reliability. Core planning and scheduling methods, which rely on manual data entry and disconnected sources, have not kept pace with the rest of our industry's processes, resulting in fragmented workflows and inefficient communication that hinders our ability to be proactive. This session will spotlight how model-based planning and innovations such as Active4D can move us past these limitations towards a future of efficient collaboration and reliable project delivery. I'm delighted to be joined today by three colleagues, each with expertise across planning, digital engineering and technology integration, and they will help to unpack the opportunities revealed in our latest white paper titled Model-Based Planning, the Future of Integrated Construction Delivery. Mark, do you want to go first at introducing yourself?
Yeah, hey, Amy. I'm Mark Chapman, Head of Innovation for LecoSoft. I joined the company about 3 years ago now, after 30 years in construction, working around the world on various different projects. Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew Norrie. I'm Head of Business Development at LecoSoft. So I work across our product suites, introducing new products to new markets and new verticals. My background's in BIM software for the past 15 years. Yeah, looking forward to the discussion. Daniel?
Yeah, hi, I'm Daniel Houston. I'm the Data Capability Manager for LecoSoft. I have a background as a mechanical engineer working as a project manager delivering backup power, and I also have worked as a data science, and I basically work across the group's products trying to work out how we can integrate artificial intelligence.
Perfect. Okay, so I think we were going to begin our discussion exploring the shift from passive to active use of 3D models, specifically around planning. And I think it might be really helpful to add a little bit of definition to these terms, and also to talk about the difference in those processes. So Mark, do you want to start us off with a bit more context about what we're talking about there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a relatively simple shift in thinking, but the industry as it knows it now, 4D is essentially one process, right? Like it's, you know, you build a schedule, you strap a 3D model to it and you have a look, and then you discover the mistakes, the opportunities and the errors that you need to then work through after you've done that process. With Active4D, we kind of turn that process on its head for a number of reasons. It's probably easiest if I share a graphic, if that's okay. So I'll just flip to screen share. The shift in thinking really was the process of when you start building a schedule or even an estimate, anything at tender stage, when you first start planning a project, there's an awful lot of data entry, which is largely manual, right? And that data entry is a process of digesting hundreds of documents, drawings, all sorts of information, conversations with people about the scope of a project, the constraints, the context of a project. But with 3D now available to us, and with the IFC data schema, becoming more commonplace now than it ever has been. That gives us an opportunity to start consuming, I guess, machine readable data, right? So consume the IFC first, and then we have the objects, we have the scope, we have the project context. And we can then start building the plan around it. So the difference really is starting with the model rather than ending with the model. So if we would just look at the process for a second, with the regular way that most people think about 4D, you have the manual data entry. You have a lot of scheduling in the Gantt chart, a lot of conversations, very chaotic process. Sometimes managed well, sometimes not so well. And then the validation and optimization period. So once you get to a kind of like a first revision, second revision, you're reasonably happy that you've got a sequence that works and is valid. You've got that period of team collaboration that takes place just to sort of validate that you've got the right, you're representing the project delivery strategy correctly, and you're getting an optimized delivery workflow. And it's at that point that you then introduce the model. And you begin the 4D linking, and then you do the same, I guess, largely this process again, but in 4D. And 4D generally isn't really available until around about 75 to 80% of the way through the process, probably somewhere around this line here. And then you have another team collaboration window that happens in 4D. So with Active4D, we have an opportunity to do it very differently. So we can start with the model. And the model isn't all of the data, but it's a lot of the data. So it's all of the scope. So you may enter other data that is related to constraints and how you format the program, how you're building the program. But 4D becomes available 20% of the way into the process, 10% of the way into the process, because you've consumed all of that data really, really quickly and really reliably. And I think that's the key step, right? Like it guarantees that data integrity. It gives you that direct link to scope. That is accurate because it's been read by a machine effectively, which means that you get a much bigger team collaboration window. So your period of validating and optimizing the schedule happens within 4D much earlier. So not only can you complete the planning process earlier, but it gives you much longer to work on the most important part of the process, which is getting that buy-in from the team, getting that challenge and working through the opportunities and the risks to really optimize the schedule so that you can be really confident of your delivery strategy, which gives you far more confidence around your time risk, your cost risk, and how reliably you're going to be able to deliver that project for the client.
Thank you. And Andrew, have you got any thoughts on the kind of difference that makes? Why is this a better process? What are the pitfalls of doing it the more traditional way?
Yeah, so I think in the more traditional sense, that the problems come in that, one, we're creating a bit of a feedback loop. So we're finding those problems that 3D brings about. So 3D gives us that better view into how things are happening on site and what's going on with the project, but we're finding that too late and then having to go back and change the schedule based on what the 3D is telling us in the traditional sense. And obviously that creates huge issues because now we've changed the schedule, and that relinking process that Mark spoke about has to happen all over again. So we're constantly going round in circles. It's quite interesting. You could compare it back to where we were with BIM and 3D design 10 years ago, right? Where people were starting their designs in 2D and then going, now we need a BIM, let's go and create a BIM model. And now we've shifted that towards, right, let's start with the BIM model and create the drawings from that. And that's kind of what we're saying here. Let's start with the BIM model and create the schedule from that and use the BIM from the very beginning to make sure that the schedule is valid. So you could equate it very much to that BIM process of pulling the work earlier in the process, which means we can then affect decisions a lot better earlier on. So it's less costly and more effective to make changes earlier in the process than when we get further down the line.
Super. And probably a question for all three of you, really. What are the practical steps that you would need to go through to adopt Active4D or model-based planning? What obstacles should people be prepared for? What do we need to inform people to do? Mark, do we go back to you for this one?
I guess, look, 4D is not a new thing, right? So I mean, I first started using it in 2009. So, it's been around for a while. And through that process of, using it, trying to use it, trying to improve it, you can learn a lot. So we've tried to put a lot of that learning that we've got from the industry into the white paper. So I think if people can have a look at the white paper and look through those lessons learned about, key things to consider before you start your 4D journey, they'll find some really useful information, or I hope it's useful. But from my experience, when you're starting your 4D journey, the first important thing is to ask, what are you wanting to try and get from 4D? So we've talked about active and passive 4D, but there are actually a number of other different forms of 4D that have been, created over the last 15, 16 years. So the first point is to understand what you want to get from your 4D process. If you decide that you do want to get to a more active workflow where you're actively using the model and consuming the model, the first problem you'll face is getting the model in the right format and making sure that it's of the right quality. That is the first barrier to entry, essentially. Now, 3D working from designers, as Andrew has just described, used to be generate drawings, generate model, right? Which was back to front. Now it's completely the opposite way around. Everyone starts in 3D and the models come from the 3D. A lot of improvements have happened around 3D. What's the word I'm looking for? The consistency around 3D, the consistency of coding that designers will put into 3D models has improved over time, but it still isn't perfect, but it is a lot better now than it was 10 years ago. So the first barrier, get the model, make it clear that you wanted it in IFC. If as a business you want to start working with 3D more often, have a standard that you expect around 3D, have a standard that you describe for what a good IFC should look like. Consider if you want your own coding structure or if you're happy to rely on the designer's coding structure, because we can consume all of that within the tools, that code structure data. For me, that's the first barrier to entry, really.
Yeah, I think model quality is always going to be an issue, but I think especially with the use case that we're talking about, I don't think we should try and make it too much of a barrier. We're not talking about Hollywood BIM here. We're not trying to make things necessarily look beautiful for client end presentations. We're trying to be functional about it, and so it's not actually the way the models look that matters, but the data that's held within them. So the more data rich and the more data we can extract from that, even if it's stuff that is just automatically created by BIM models like volumes and areas, that's still valuable information that we can be using within our schedule. It doesn't have to be fully BIM level 2 or whatever we want to talk about, standard models to be able to get some use out of it. Things like Revit and ArchiCAD create this sort of data just out of the box, so we can use it to some degree.
I think a point I've made a few times, Andrew, is that working with some 4D, even if it's less than perfect, is better than working with no 3D, right? Like it just helps get that understanding really quickly. Like every time, I went through a period of, 6 or 7 years where I was planning a new project end to end every 4 to 6 weeks, right? And the amount of data that you have to consume to understand a project is huge. And some projects now it's insane for a normal human to try and get their head around how much information there is that gets generated at tender stage that you have to very quickly understand. But when you have a 3D model, you can almost skip the 200 drawings. You just go straight to the model and you understand instantly what the thing is that you're building. Yeah.
I think it comes down to intent, right? If you're going into it thinking, I want to bring in this 3D model and I want to create something gorgeous that I can show to my customers, at an early stage, you're probably not going to get that, right? But if you're going into it going, I want to interrogate this model and find out what information I can get out of it to help me in the planning process, every model is going to have something that it can help you with.
Yeah, I guess that's why I mentioned the why, right? So I'm just going to try and find that part in the white paper. Like starting with the why you want to do this. If you do just want to focus on Hollywood 4D and fancy videos, then that's not what the Active4D process is designed to. That's not the value that it's designed to generate. The value that it's designed to generate is fast understanding and really bringing some horsepower to that collaboration and optimization window that you have when you're planning a new project.
And do we think there's also sort of additional value? So in the white paper, we talk about data longevity and reusability in other construction workflows. So I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts on why we think getting that planning and scheduling data is important for the project as it goes to site and then to handover.
I can probably touch on that quickly and then hand over to Daniel if that's okay. So modern AI applications that are now some have been around for a number of years. Workflows are still being created. Large language models capabilities changing daily, weekly, monthly. And those of us that are building AI capability around the planning workflow, I guess, understand a few things, right? And one of those is that Gantt charts in and of themselves don't have enough information for a large language model to be able to actually use to predict, to make useful predictions or to make useful foresight observations. It just doesn't. It has very, very rudimentary descriptions for the tasks. It has some links, it maybe has some resources and codes, but it doesn't have a direct link to scope. And construction is an insanely hard problem for a human to solve. And when we're trying to get large language models to help us with solving that problem, they need more information. And the best source of that information is a well-structured 3D scope model, which then can be combined with or used as the basis for the sequence that we're intending to build the project in. And that is a far richer data source than a Gantt chart on its own ever will be. So if we're looking to reuse data in the future and understand how we went about building a project, or how we were looking at building it, then having that direct link to scope is really important. Being a company in 10 years time, 15 years time, that has a data stack that's built around Active4D is going to be far richer than a company that has a data stack that's only built around schedules. I think that's probably the easiest way I can describe it. And Daniel, I don't know if you've got a different way to try and
that's
explain.
exactly right. So there's 2 points there. One is the contextual information that you have. If you're just trying, what language models or just other AI tools are going to do is they're going to be able to look at projects and they're going to try to help us answer the big questions, which is, where is my risk? How many resources? How long is this going to take, right? Delay is the bane of every single project's existence. And these tools are going to help us to work out where those risks are and where those delays are going to come from. But if you're a person analyzing a project, you can't just look at a Gantt chart because it doesn't have that sort of information, those quantities, that volume, that area. I'm fitting out level 15. How big is level 15? How many resources am I putting on it? A person could look at that and say, well, how big is the project? Immediately, they're going to that scope, that information of what are we actually talking about. By having that 4D information, models are going to be able to understand that. So it's going to provide more context. It's going to help them actually be able to reason about and make sense of the projects we're working on. And then it's going to be really useful in that historical context, in that AI and machine learning need data to train on, right? Language models, large language models have only become a thing because they've been able to train on all of the internet. Currently, there's not a lot of really good, rich, high quality historical data for planning. There's Gantt charts, but there's no high quality aspect to it, and that controls haven't been taken around the data, which is a separate conversation. But the other more critical thing is the amount of contextual information, again, is limited, as we already discussed. So by having that high quality contextual information and then building it over time, we'll be able to train better models in the future that will highlight those risks much more reliably.
Super. Anything that you want to add there, Andrew?
No, I think it's just to really take it from a bit more of a layman's terms, obviously not being the planning expert that these two are, not having worked in planning, but when you think about it at a really basic level, people think a plan is just the dates and stuff that we deliver, right? But really what it also adds to it is kind of intent and logic, and actually the build methodology. But as Daniel says, what that then lacks is the context behind what you're actually building, and the combination of the two I think will be really powerful towards being able to, once we do that and build up that library, being able to truly automate some of this stuff as well, because having both of those things together will be what leads to the automation that I think people are eventually looking for.
Yeah, and I guess all of these things are making me think that alongside the kind of obvious benefits around data and value that data can bring to projects, there's some basic improvements that we can see for people who are using Active4D. So I know, like, we've talked in the past about just the speed of that initial planning process when you're at tender phase and being able to react to that quite quickly. But it's also things like using visualisation to see what's going on site and see if your build plan works. Does anybody want to kind of offer anything else in that remit that's a little bit more kind of back to the beginning of the story?
Yeah, I guess there's a number of things I can think of there, but like, you know, at tender stage, it's all about speed, reliability, you know, understanding, collaboration, lots of information flying around, and you know, the schedule or program, depending on what part of the world you're from, is core to that, right? Like I mean, Andrew just touched on something that's, you know, worth mentioning there, which I like to think of it as large circle planning, small circle schedule, right? So there's an awful lot of work that goes into planning a project, and there's an awful lot of information that's generated from planning a project, but there's only a small amount of it that goes into a schedule, and that's our record of our plan, if you like, our intent to, or our delivery strategy is probably a better way of putting it. And anything that we can do to give teams a bigger window to collaborate and optimize that schedule and improve reliability so that things are more certain when you go into delivery, because you have to start very, very quickly. As soon as you've got a project award, you don't have very long before you're physically starting work. Anything you can do to, I guess, not so much guarantee, but have a high confidence that everybody's aligned on a delivery strategy when you're delivering a project is great. Anything that helps that is great. Whereas with the old process, you know, programs, they're very hard to read in and of themselves. And as Daniel's touched on, you know, there just isn't enough information in a program to understand the intent. You have to look at a lot of other documents to supplement the program. So if you're going into a standard approach on delivery, there's a risk that you're going in that everyone has a different perception for what the plan actually is. And because Gantt charts are quite hard to consume, it's not unusual to very quickly plans to diverge. If it's a large project, you can very quickly end up with a number of different plans. Oh, well, I have my own, I don't look at that one. Whereas if you do everything that you can to, I guess, continue that thread of alignment through the life of a project by maintaining a direct connection with your scope and your program, that's really helpful. It's really valuable. I mean, a lot of the value there is, I guess, unquantifiable in some ways. But the traditional approach to 4D, you know, you're still planning in Gantt only most of the time, and the Gantt is sent away to be connected to a 3D model by some unnamed either experts, internal or external. And then by the time the product comes back for people to look at, the project's already moved on. You know, they're already out of alignment by the time that 4D view comes back.
Yeah.
And that's really unhelpful. But it also adds additional cost to the process, right? So if you haven't got your own internal 4D BIM people, and you're sending it to an external consultancy, then you've got an ongoing monthly cost there that can be significant for large projects. So not only are you losing out on the opportunity to keep your teams aligned and do it internally and get the most value from it, but you're also incurring additional cost from doing it externally, and you're losing the opportunity to build that knowledge in your organization so that you can keep improving the workflow. You know, in some ways, I guess, you know, the increasing demands that are put on contractors to deliver projects, the requirements that get written into contracts, some of those we're seeing they are embedding that old 4D process into the workflows. You know, they're asking for the flashy videos, which isn't really helpful when it comes to improving capability within teams.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think there's a couple of other things that we always think of. Well, we always, but people think of planning as the stuff, it's telling us what's going to happen, right? What we're going to do. But actually, Daniel brought up a really good point. It comes back to data quality at the end of the project and what we've got. But if we do it right and we capture the right data, all the progress information, all the past revisions and everything, it becomes more than, it's no longer what we planned to do, it's what we did, right? And it's the history of everything that we did. And when you combine that with the context of the 3D model, suddenly we've got some really useful insights that can help us moving forward outside of that single project that we worked on, right? To give us that kind of reusable logic to understand why things went wrong before. I think that's the bit that we sometimes miss in our analytics, is we know what went wrong. We know that something went wrong. We know that something got delayed, but we don't capture the why. And I think this helps us capture the why if we have that all together in that fully revisioned and progressed schedule at the end.
Do you want to add anything there, Daniel?
Yeah, the only thing that I'd add there is the critical thing is that by bringing the planning stage into that 4D environment, you can actually have the design built around, to a degree, the plan, which is something that doesn't generally happen that much, right? You get, here's the building you're building, here's the thing that you're trying to build, now go figure out how to do it. By linking them closer, you're starting that design process, you can do it with those lessons learned, going, oh, this is how we built it last time, and it actually fell over, or it caused this delay. By integrating that closer, that design actually becomes better aligned with how you're going to execute it, which is something that often gets missed in these large projects.
Yeah, I mean, if we zoom out a little bit further for a second and think about, big C construction, think about the industry. It's not very good at generating a digital knowledge base behind itself, right, as it moves forward over time. So each project is almost unique, and the way that it transports experience through time is its people, right? So, but given the knowledge and memories of its people, but given that our workload is ever increasing and that the size of projects is always increasing, that knowledge base is diluting over time as we go forward, because people retire, new people come in, we've got more projects, people experience is more spread out, but we're not creating that digital backlog behind us that allows us to learn. Now, one thing that LLMs are very good at, as most people will have worked out by now, is making knowledge more accessible, right? So if you start a conversation with your favorite agent, you'll be able to get some reasonably good information about how to tackle a new construction process, whether that's in buildings or in civil engineering. But that level of detail that Daniel's talking about and Andrew just mentioned isn't there, right? Because it doesn't know about your particular project. It doesn't know about what you're about to do. So if we can create that digital backlog of information by direct connecting scope to the why did we take that approach? Then that gives us a much better solid database in the future to add even more intelligence to the LLM capability. But we need to have it first before we can do that.
Okay. Slightly preempting what we're going to see when we have Bob's demo. Does anybody want to offer up their thoughts on what makes it so easy to change your planning process to a model-based planning process using Asta4D?
Yeah, I guess I can touch on that. So I've just been looking through the white paper as we were talking. So I think it's down on page 15 where we start to talk about the steps to adopting model-based planning. And I guess when you start your 4D journey, those of us that started some time ago, and even those starting now, will understand that you need to learn a lot in addition to what you already do as a planner. If you want to start 4D planning, there's a lot to learn. That Andrew, I don't know how many different 3D formats there are now, but 15, 20 different 3D formats that people come across. You don't know what the quality is going to be like when they get to you. You don't know how much post editing you're going to have to do. And you've got to try and get those all into a tool, and you're quite often, hit with a deadline. There's a lot of demands put on you if you're going to try and maintain that workflow. So quite often it ends up being outsourced to another person. And when I was thinking about how to I guess, turn the 4D process around a little bit. I wanted to try and get rid of that barrier to entry. So rather than thinking about 15 formats, with Asta, we've chosen to focus on one, and that is the most data rich and most data structured format, IFC. So there's only one format to understand. In the tool, we're making it easy for that to be consumed. We're making that easy to be understood. We're making it easy to see the data that's within the model. You can even use Asta as a 4D, as a 3D model checking tool if you want, to some extent, to see what the model looks like when it comes through to you. So yeah, it's just about making it more accessible, making it less of a barrier to entry, if that makes sense. So we're trying to get the tool to do as much of the heavy lifting of that barrier to entry as we can.
Yeah, I can just add to that. So I think the other thing that really helps with users adopting 4D in Asta is that it's in Asta, right? So it's in your native tool that you already know. So you're not trying to change the whole way that you schedule. You're not trying to change your whole process. You're just tacking on the 3D model into that process. And as Mark said, yeah, having IFC as that single format makes it so easy because it's only one format to learn, only one data structure to learn. But then we also give you a lot of tools in there to help you manage some of those problems where the models aren't quite going to come through as you'd expect. So, for instance, where you're going to get a single wall all the way up the side of a building, and that doesn't help you in a 4D process. We give you the tools to split that up, rework that model directly within Asta Power Project without the need to take it out to an editing tool, edit and re-export that back into Asta. So we allow you just to work directly within there, even with models that maybe aren't of the highest quality, to be able to get something out. I think that's the key.
Probably to round off this section of our webinar, it would be really good to hear from each of you, like the one thing that you would like the people watching to take away. And I'm going to come to you first, please, Andrew.
Yeah, I think for me, it's that people need to start with realizing the why they're doing this. From a planner's point of view, a planner who's implementing model-based planning into the process needs to remember that this is a process for planners to help with the planning process, not to do any of the other stuff that people maybe say 4D is great for. And that is still something that can happen further down the line. But what we're focusing on here is the planning process. So don't get hung up on the models being great, things being pretty, everything being perfect. It's just, what can I get out of this model to help me in my planning process today? Not necessarily trying to boil the ocean with a great big Hollywood BIM style model. Yeah, that'll be it.
Super. And Mark?
I think I'm gonna try and direct my comment towards construction management. So planning isn't something we do for fun. Planning isn't something that is a side activity. When we're planning a project, it is literally one of the 2 or 3 core processes for how we're going to deliver a project, or how we're going to win a project, or how we're going to secure a tender for our company. And when we're doing it, the process that we go through, the output isn't just a Gantt chart. It is about having a high degree of certainty on our time-related costs, so that when we're putting that proposal forward, we know how much time risk, cost risk that we're accepting as a company with the contract that we've got, and we're making sure that our team and everybody else that is surrounding the project, all the stakeholders, are aligned on how we're going to deliver it. So that we can get to the outcome that the client wants with confidence. And we all talk about on-time delivery and getting there at the right cost, but planning is a core process to how we get there. And whether or not planning is done reliably is one of the bigger risks around project delivery, right? If a project hasn't been planned reliably, then your time-related costs are somewhat unknown or somewhat at risk. And that affects everybody's bottom line. It affects when a project is available to be used by the public, or by the stakeholders, or by the project owner. It has a big impact. And I think the process that we're working with now as an industry, and I say the process, there is one I guess, main process that's out there, has come of age now, right? Like it's hit its limits in terms of the amount of complexity and size of project that it can deliver. It's hitting its limits. Our productivity is flatlined. Reliability of outcome probably hasn't improved for a number of years. So I think that means that as an industry, we need to start properly looking at how we can rethink some of our decades-old processes and how we can do things differently to try and meet the challenge of increasing size and complexity. And for me, Active4D is one way that we can do that now that 3D design is coming of age and it's becoming more consistent. It is another source of data that we can use differently to rethink an old process and hopefully come up with a better outcome. So yeah, I think I'd just like to get that message out there to construction management or project owners, that I think allowing the industry to properly innovate how it plans projects is important, because this is a process that, well, Active4D is in some ways, it's even more accessible for the design stage than it is for project stage, right? They have the models, they have the responsibility to come up for, what is the timeline that the client can expect. So, being able to use the Active4D process before you even get to tender stage, I think is a valuable outcome, but one that some people might not be considering.
Super. And last but not least, Dan, do you want to go last?
Yeah, I think that the thing that I really want them to take away is, if they want these next generation AI tools, the quicker they can use these tools and build the data set, that historical rich data set, the quicker they're going to be able to do it, right? Today, there's very limited to no examples of this actively 4D planned schedule data that is linked to the BIM information, so that you can sit there and ask a model, hey, we've done, a data center before, we got delayed. How do we get out of that problem with one particular bit? You can't do that today because that data isn't there for the models to look at and be able to help you answer that question. But the quicker you use this, the quicker you start building that data set, the quicker you're going to get access to these things, where it's going to help you plan, it's going to help you capture that risk. So it's just really, if you can start adopting it today, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just bringing that information in and having that huge leap in data quality is going to transform the things that we can do with it.
Super. That's great. Thank you, everyone.
Now let's move on to our demonstration. We'll show how Active4D built into Asta4D revolutionises construction planning by automatically creating and synchronising schedules from your models. You'll see how a rules-based engine links project tasks directly with embedded IFC data, enabling fast, accurate planning, and as things change, no more laborious manual mapping or risk-prone data entry. The demo will illustrate real-time collaboration and the powerful ability to keep your schedule and model always in sync, transforming both project delivery and day-to-day workflows. Let me introduce Chris Ray, also known as Bob.
What we're showing is someone, up until this, what people do is they create a project schedule. They may or may not have a 3D model. And then they would look, and what we've had for years is you can link that model to that schedule. Different ways of doing it, but you have a project independent, you bring a model in and you link it to it. What the concept here is this concept that actually, rather than starting with a separate schedule and a separate model, let's take the model and create the schedule for it. Now, this is not replacing the scheduler's job. This is just the first pass, the first run, using data and metadata that's in the model. And as time goes on, that data is getting better. So this example here is a very simple example. I've seen some with a customer that not only creates a project, it creates all the durations, the logic links, everything from just a model. So there's massive potential here. And it's not replacing the schedule. It means that 80% of the like a tender time, or bid that someone's putting in, 80% of that scheduling time is gone. Not the actual scheduling, it's all the data entry. Those 10,000 tasks they're typing in is automatically done for them because it's taking all that metadata. So what this video is starting off with is we've got a blank power project in here. Now, ideally, the demo should really show that coming down from Vision. in there. And what they've done is, and they've linked it to a model, 2 models. And again, so I'm going to start it here, and hopefully you can see this. So they're going here, they're selecting, we're going to go into the configuration and select the models. And I'll just pause it there to show you, we've got 2 models. We've got an architectural model, we've got a structural model. So that's all the slabs and columns in there. And then we've got the Riverside group model, which combines those 2, so federates those models together. Unlimited amount of models can be federated together in there. So if I go through this, and then what we do is we bring that in, it opens up inside Power Project, and there is the model. And then we have this option at the top, which is an add-in that we called Schedule from IFC. And we select that. That allows us to read that model, and these are all the properties that you can see inside the model. So ID, parent name, domain, IFC type, and these are all common items across all those models they've got in there. So all we're simply doing is using the data inside the model, choosing those elements, and we're going to go over, say, for example, here to site, I think it is, we'll choose in there. We'll say we're going to do site, and then everything after that will be location based, and then we're going to do it by entity. And what we're going to do is the property of the activity name is going to come from the name of the item, but this wall base and so forth. And what this does now, this is creates a first pass of the schedule. We can go through here and say we do or don't want some of these items, rearrange them in case floor 3 is above floor 2 and so forth, or below it. Then we can actually say, let's take some of these properties and create code libraries inside Power Project for those. And we just clicking a few selections here. And once we've done that, you can see a few details, and then we're going to hit create. And just to pause there again, if you see in the background, that's now created a fully built schedule. It's not linked, it's all the activities in the hierarchy level based by site, location, which is the level, and then the entity name and the name of the actual object that you're linking to. So we've created that. What we're then going to do is close that down. That's done. We can now look at seeing here, we've actually created that IFC entities code library, and that's been pre-allocated to all the activities inside here. So if we go into one of these and we look at that, I think we're going to go into, just removed some of the items we don't need. And there we go, there's all the different tasks. That's the name of the objects and elements are inside there with the area and volume of those objects. And then what we're going to do is we're going to select all the activities in here, and we're just simply at this point, we're just going to put a finish to start link against all activities. So we go into the open to this, select the first task, Control select A to select everything. In Power Project, just do the link tasks in there, reschedule that so it recalculates it, and then we go back to the top level of the project, and that project now you can see there has been created by automatically, and we can show all levels, open it up to see the schedule in detail. Now obviously its durations are just default durations, 5 days each at the moment, but that's gone through and added all these activities in automatically there. We're just going to add a column in here, the code library, so the task.entity, and you can see there it shows you the entity and the items are that's the slab, that's the stairs, the walls, and so forth. Then we just go in and we set up the playback, and on this, you know, we're not going to have 60 seconds. We make sure it's set to 20 seconds, play by day, and then close on that, and then we hit the play button. And as you can see, in a matter of literally minutes, we've taken a group model of federated of architectural and structural and created a fully built schedule. And we can now see that running through. As you go there, it's just highlighting the items it's selecting as it's going through. But again, obviously, the better data inside the model, the better this schedule will be. But the key here is, you know, we're one of the only systems out there that does this. And models are getting better and better, and more metadata, and more data is being stored inside them as it goes. And even if they're not requesting it, the people providing the models are actually putting more data into them. There we go.
Thank you to everyone who joined today's webinar. We hope that you have found it useful and informative. We believe that model-based planning offers a transformative solution, integrating rich 3D models and data from the outset, and leveraging innovative tools like Active4D to automate and synchronise schedules for more accurate, adaptable outcomes. By embracing approaches that prioritise data longevity, reusability and continuous collaboration, organisations can move beyond passive 4D visualisation to proactive real-time project management and decision-making. If you're ready to shape the future of your construction workflows, our white paper provides practical steps to help you adopt model-based planning and position your business for ongoing innovation and success. Thank you once again, and please reach out for more information, a copy of the white paper, or to ask any questions by emailing asta.marketing@alicosoft.com. Thank you.
Hi everyone, hopefully you can hear me and I'm back with you. So we have had a few questions in. Andrew and Bob, are you still on the line?
Yeah, we haven't abandoned you.
Thank you, just checking. Super, okay, so let's have a little look down here. One of those questions, what are some of the best practices for managing and validating data within IFC models to reduce errors? Andrew, that's probably one for you, I think.
I mean, there's a number of tools you can use post getting the model, like things like Celebri for model checking and data checking. But I think the key to it really is making sure that you get your original request for data right. So the request for the type of data that you need for this purpose isn't complicated, but it's clear, it's important that it's in the information requirements that you send to your design consultant or subcontractors when you're receiving those models. So I think being clear about what you want at the start of the project is really important for that.
Okay, super. Next one is, with Asta4D, do users have the flexibility to choose between active and passive 4D workflows? So I guess, are we forcing people down the active route, or can you do both?
You can do both. You can do both, as you can go down either route.
And I think as well, like I don't know if you can get to it. I saw one of the other questions is around like, if you have a poor model, you're going to have a poor schedule, right? If the model quality is bad, the model quality gets inherited into the schedule, then you end up with a messy schedule. We're not saying that's not the end game, right? You start with the active and then you move into passive and adding more detail on top, or even using like activity libraries within there, and task pools even to link. So like the classic example is we bring in a wall from Revit and it's a single pane wall, right? So all we'll get in the schedule is one line for a wall. We're going to build a wall, but actually we know there's steps to that, and those steps could be in a task pool for a wall, and we can link that up as well. So as you get deeper into it, you can kind of manufacture the quality that you need on top of a kind of poor quality model.
Super. And then I think you can see these as well, Andrew, but we've had a few questions around the model quality within Asta4D and the viewer. Do you want to talk to any of those?
Yeah, so I think maybe there's been a bit of it, because I saw a lot of questions around this as well. There's maybe a bit, we're talking today about model-based planning, right? And that's one of the things that we think is really important around using Asta4D, which is using a 3D model to help you plan better. For that purpose, what we're trying to say is model quality doesn't, the view and the quality and the cinematics of the 4D don't matter for that purpose. Completely understand further down the line, you guys want to use this once the model quality gets better and you're getting more from your design as you move through, you're going to want to start creating some nicer stuff out of it. So we are definitely looking at options for that. One of the things that we're doing at the moment is working with the Unity Games engine to embed that as our default viewer or an optional viewer within there. So you will have the option to have that powerful 3D viewer of your model. We're also looking at a number of improvements around in the future what type of models we can bring in. So at the moment IFC is the great data model, but for the more visual stuff you might want something like FBX that has more of a texture to it, and so we are looking at those options, as well as further down the line integrations with other tools. I think I put it a bit like with Revit, you don't use Revit for the client-facing presentation. You export it out and you render it through a pipeline. Similarly, we want to have options for that as well, or better options for that with Asta.
Super. I think just another question that's just popped up. Is there a recommended data requirement for the model that helps provide the schedule? Don't know if you've just answered that, but.
I think it depends how far you want to go with it. We have had clients in the past who are even putting things like productivity rates and more information around the materials that's being used and things like that to be able to better inform what you want to do. I think at the moment, though, just for what Bob showed, I think just a very clear IFC structure that you could check through a basic checker, that we have levels, everything on the right level and assigned to the right level, and that type of thing really helps.
Excellent. I think that's all the questions that we've had in. We will, when we send out the recording of the webinar to everybody, we will include a link to the white paper. So that was one of the other questions. So that will come out to you hopefully tomorrow, maybe Monday. So yeah, I think unless there's anything else from you, Andrew, or you, Bob, then we can call it a day.
I think maybe just a quick plug for the fact that we are on the road shows over the next couple of weeks. Amy, I don't know if you've got the dates for that. People, if they do want to come and talk to us about any of this,
Yeah.
a few of us will be there and we'll be able to talk to you more about Active4D.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a user group run roadshow on the 19th of November so that's next Wednesday in Manchester, and then we've got one in London on the 26th. So I will include that in the follow-up email, or links to register for those. We'll give you breakfast. It's free other than your time. So super. All right then. Well, have a good day, everyone, and thank you for attending and sticking with us.
Thank you. Cheers, guys.